On my 70th birthday anniversary, I stood at the edge of a cliff. My son Victor's hands weren't reaching to steady me. They were reaching to end me. His wife Clara stood behind him, whispering encouragement, her eyes filled with greed. That moment of their betrayal, their hatred, was when I realized a nightmare I had lived through all these years wasn't fate. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was murder. They say the worst pain a parent can feel is burying their own child. But what if I told you the same son who took my firstborn away also murdered my wife and hid it for 25 years? But to understand how it came to this, I need to take you back to when my family was still whole, back when my wife Margaret still smiled, back before my firstborn son Thomas fell to his death. My name is Joe. For most of my life, I believed I had built a good family. Margaret, my wife, was the heart of our home. She had this way of making even the hardest days feel bearable. She laughed easily, cooked meals that warmed not just the stomach but the soul, and she had a way of smoothing over every rough edge in life. We raised 2 sons together, Thomas, the elder, and Victor, the younger. Thomas was the kind of son every parent prays for. He was steady, dependable, with a kindness that made people trust him. He wanted to take over the family business one day, our carpentry company. But it wasn't just sawdust and hand tools anymore. Over the years, I had grown it into something much bigger. We supplied custom furniture to wealthy estates, high-end hotels, and city offices. Our name was respected, our contracts profitable. What started as me working out a shed had turned into a thriving business, worth more money than I ever dreamed I'd see. And Thomas understood that wealth came with responsibility. He was eager to protect what we had built. Victor saw it differently. From the time he was young, there was a sharpness about him. He was clever, too clever sometimes. He hated following rules, hated being told no. While Thomas would sit with me in the workshop, running his hands over polished oak and asking how to identify the strongest grain, Victor would disappear into town, flashing money, chasing thrills. I remember one evening, when Victor was about 16, Thomas was sanding a cedar cabinet beside me, his movements careful. He glanced up at me with a smile. "Dad, someday I'll make sure this place is twice as successful. Maybe even open another branch in the city." Before I could answer, Victor strolled in, smirking. "What's the point? All this hammering and sawing. You two smell like sawdust all the time. When I take over, I'll sell the business. We'll be rich without all the splinters." Thomas frowned. "You don't sell family, Victor. This is our legacy." Victor rolled his eyes. "Legacy doesn't pay for fast cars or holidays. Money does." Margaret, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped in quickly. "Enough, boys. There's room in this family for both responsibility and dreams." But I could see it already. Thomas's dreams were about building. Victor's dreams were about taking. It was a late summer afternoon, 25 years ago, when my world cracked. The boys had gone hiking together near the gorge. Margaret had encouraged it. She thought spending time with his older brother might help Victor straighten out, maybe teach him the value of family. I was in the workshop when the news came. Neighbors came running, faces pale, shouting my name. I dropped my tools and sprinted faster than I ever thought my legs could carry me. By the time I reached the gorge, I saw a crowd gathered. And then I saw him. Thomas's body lay broken on the rocks below, his shirt torn, his arm twisted in a way no arm should ever bend. Victor sat nearby, his face in his hands. His voice was hoarse as he cried out. It was an accident. He slipped. I tried to grab him, but I couldn't. Margaret screamed. The kind of scream that rips out of a mother when part of her soul is torn away. She clawed at me, begging me to go down there, to do something, though we both knew it was too late. The authorities ruled it just that, an accident. Boys hiking, a misstep, a tragedy no one could prevent. But something in Victor's eyes haunted me. It wasn't just grief. It was calculation. Cold, fleeting, but unmistakable. Margaret never recovered. She would sit for hours in Thomas's room, holding his books, his shirts, the little carved wooden horse He made with me when he was 12. She whispered his name in the quiet, as though saying it might bring him back. One night, I found her sitting by the window in her nightgown. She turned to me with hollow eyes and said, "Joe, why him? Why Thomas? Why not me instead?" I held her hands, kissed them, and whispered, "Margaret, don't say that. We'll get through this. We still have Victor." But she shook her head, her lips trembling. "Victor doesn't love us the way Thomas did. I can feel it." I didn't know what to say. I pulled her close, but I felt how frail she had become. And then, just a year after Thomas's death, Margaret herself was gone. The doctor said it was her heart, that the grief had been too much, that sometimes sorrow can physically break you. People whispered about it in town, calling it a broken heart. I believed them. I had to. What other explanation was there? My wife had loved our firstborn so deeply that when he was ripped away, her soul followed him. At least, that's what I thought. After Margaret's funeral, it was just me and Victor. I tried to hold on, try to believe that maybe with time we could heal. But Victor grew colder, more distant. He spent recklessly, avoided responsibility. And when he spoke about his brother or his mother, it was always with irritation, as though they had burdened him. There were nights I sat in the quiet of my workshop, staring at the wood shavings on the floor, wondering where I had gone wrong. How had one son been born with so much goodness and the other with so much darkness? But I didn't know the half of it yet, because Margaret didn't die of grief. She didn't die from a broken heart. She died because she saw something she wasn't supposed to see, and my son Victor made sure she could never speak again. After Margaret's death, the house felt unbearably empty. Her laughter was gone, her warmth was gone, and the silence pressed against me like a weight I could never lift. I poured myself into the business. The carpentry company had become more than just a way to earn a living. It was my way of keeping Thomas and Margaret alive. In a sense, every deal I signed, every piece of furniture we delivered, felt like proof that their sacrifices weren't wasted. Victor, on the other hand, had no such respect for it. In his 20s, he grew restless, impatient. He wanted money fast, and he wanted it without lifting a finger. He started treating the company like his personal bank, demanding advances, selling off small tools and materials behind my back, even borrowing against our reputation in town. One evening, I found him in the office, rifling through invoices. "What are you doing with those?" I asked. He didn't even flinch, checking numbers. "I need to know how much this place is worth. If you just let me handle things, Dad, we'd be millionaires by now." I slammed my hand on the desk. "We are already well off, Victor, but this isn't about greed. It's about building something solid, something lasting." He leaned back in the chair with a smirk. "Lasting? You think sawdust and sweat is going to last forever? Wake up. The real money is in selling, in flipping this place to someone bigger. We could be on a yacht in Spain right now if you weren't so stubborn." I stared at him, stunned. "Your brother wanted to protect this company. Your mother believed in it. And you just want to throw it away?" He shrugged. Thomas was soft. "That's why he's gone." "And Mom!" He stopped himself, but the chill in his eyes told me exactly what he wanted to say. That night, for the first time, I wondered if I had been wrong about Thomas's death. But doubt is a quiet poison. It whispers but never shouts. And so I buried it again. Victor didn't change. He gambled. He drank. He bought expensive suits with money he didn't earn. And then he met Clara. Clara was beautiful, poised, and sharp. At first, I thought maybe she would calm Victor down. Maybe she would bring out a better side of him. But I was wrong. She only fueled his ambition. Together, they were like fire and gasoline. I'll never forget the first dinner we had together. I served roast chicken, the way Margaret used to, try and keep the tradition alive. Clara barely touched her food. She kept glancing around the dining room, her eyes lingering on the antique cabinet, the heavy oak table, the paintings Margaret had chosen. "You have a lovely home, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice sweet but hollow. "It must be worth quite a bit." Victor chuckled, reaching for his wine. "The house is nothing compared to the company. Isn't that right, Dad?" I looked at him, then at her, and I saw it, the hunger in her eyes. Not for food, not for family, but for what they thought would one day be theirs. As the years went on, the distance between us only grew. Victor and Clara lived beyond their means, throwing parties, traveling, always coming back to me with open hands. And like a fool, I gave in more often than I should have. Maybe part of me hoped that if I kept supporting them, they'd finally treat me like a father instead of a bank. But greed is never satisfied. One morning, not long after my 69th birthday, Victor came into my study with a folder. He dropped it on my desk with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's time we talk about the will, Dad." I frowned. "What about it?" He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "You're not getting any younger. It only makes sense to settle things now, to make sure everything passes smoothly, to make sure Clara and I are the sole heirs." My jaw tightened. "Sole heirs? What about your mother's sister, Beatrice? She's always been family. And there are charities we support." Victor cut me off, his voice sharp. "Forget Beatrice. Forget the charities. This business, this house, every cent in your accounts. It should come to me, to us." Clara appeared in the doorway then, her voice soft, coaxing. "It's not that we're greedy, Joe. We just want security. We've built our lives around this future. Don't you want to see your son and his wife taken care of?" I stared at them, the air heavy in the room. Something inside me shifted. Their words weren't just selfish. They were dangerous. For the first time in decades, the whispers of doubt roared back into my mind, and I began to realize Thomas's death, Margaret's sudden passing, they might not have been tragedies of fate. They might have been stepping stones for Victor. And if I didn't act, I could be next. The night after Victor and Clara demanded the will, I couldn't sleep. Margaret's photo sat on the bedside table, her smile frozen in time. I stared at it for hours, whispering, "What would you have me do, Maggie? What would you say if you saw what our son has become?" The house creaked with its usual sounds, the wind through the shutters, the settling of old beams, but I felt a chill I hadn't known in years. For the first time, the place that had once been my fortress felt like a cage. A few days later, Beatrice came to visit. Margaret's younger sister was the only family member who still came around without asking for anything. She was a sharp woman, blunt to a fault, but her loyalty was unquestionable. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat across from me, studying my face. "You look pale, Joe. What's wrong?" I hesitated. "It's Victor. He's pressing about the will. He and Clara, they won't let it go." Beatrice pursed her lips. "That woman's got her claws in him. But Victor, he was already lost before she came along." Her words stung, though I knew she was right. Then she leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "Joe, I've kept this to myself for years, but I can't anymore. Margaret, she didn't die of grief." My heart skipped. "What are you saying?" "I visited her the night before she passed. She told me something that shook me. She said she caught Victor and Thomas fighting near the gorge. She saw Victor shove him. She said she wanted to confront him, to drag the truth into the light. And the next day," Beatrice's voice trembled. "The next day, she was gone." I gripped the arms of my chair, my knuckles white. "Are you saying Victor poisoned her?" Beatrice nodded slowly. She wasn't the type to faint from heartbreak. She was strong, Joe, but she looked afraid that night. I should have told you then. I thought maybe it was her grief speaking. But now, seeing how he circles you like a vulture," she shook her head. "No, he's capable of it." Her words cracked open a shell I'd been hiding in for decades. Margaret's sudden collapse, the doctor's vague explanations, the way Victor had seemed almost relieved at the funeral. It all clicked into place. That night, I sat in my study long after Beatrice left, staring at the records of the company, the numbers Victor had twisted and drained. He was in debt, deep debt, and men like Victor, when cornered, become dangerous. The very next week, Victor came to me again, this time with a smile too wide, too forced. "Dad," he said, "Clara and I have been thinking, your 70th birthday is coming up. Why don't we take a family trip? Up to the mountains. Fresh air, beautiful views. It'll be a perfect way to celebrate. I looked at him carefully. His eyes glittered, but not with warmth, with calculation. You hate the mountains, I said flatly. He laughed. People change. Clara slid her hand into his, her voice dripping with false sweetness. It'll be good for you, Joe. We can all spend time together. You need that. But I heard the unspoken message. It'll be the perfect chance. That evening, I sat at my desk and began to write. I wrote everything Margaret had told Beatrice. Everything Henry, my own memory, whispered in my mind about the gorge. I wrote about Victor's demands, his debts, his obsession with the will, and the trip to the mountains. And I sealed the letter in an envelope, addressed to Beatrice. I also did something I never thought I'd do. I bought a small recorder. Old-fashioned, but effective. I kept it tucked inside my jacket pocket. If Victor wanted to play his game, I'd play mine. The day of the trip drew near. Victor was oddly cheerful, Clara busier than ever making plans. I went along with it, but inside, every nerve in me buzzed like a wire. On the morning we left, I stood in the living room, staring at the house, the heavy wooden beams, the smell of varnished oak, the echoes of laughter that once filled it. I whispered, I'll come back. One way or another, I'll come back. As we drove toward the mountains, I looked at Victor through the rear-view mirror. He was humming softly, tapping his fingers against his leg. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, her smile smug. And that's when I knew with absolute certainty. They weren't taking me there to celebrate. They were taking me there to finish what Victor started 25 years ago. The road twisted higher into the mountains, the air thinning, crisp with pine. Victor had insisted on driving. Clara sat in the passenger seat, her sunglasses reflecting the jagged peaks ahead. I sat in the back, silent, my recorder humming softly in my jacket pocket. Beautiful, isn't it? Victor called over his shoulder, his voice falsely bright. Fresh air. You don't get this down in the valley. I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the way his fingers gripped the wheel, too tight, too eager. Clara turned, her smile stretched. We thought we'd stop near the ridge. There's a path that leads to an overlook. Perfect spot for family photos. Perfect spot for something. I muttered under my breath. An hour later, we parked near the trailhead. Victor grabbed a backpack, whistling cheerfully, while Clara fussed with her scarf. I followed them, every step heavy with dread, but sharpened by resolve. The trail narrowed as we climbed. Pine needles crunched underfoot. Birds scattered as if they too sensed the tension. Victor led the way, his shoulders squared, his gait purposeful. Clara kept glancing back at me, her eyes gleaming with a hunger she barely hid. Finally, the path opened to a cliff's edge. The valley stretched far below, a sheer drop into rocks and rushing water. My heart pounded. I'd imagined this place before. This was the gorge where Margaret had once told Beatrice she saw Victor kill Thomas. The same place Victor had chosen for me. Victor spread his arms wide, grinning. Look at this view, Dad. Magnificent, isn't it? I stepped closer, pretending awe, though my stomach churned. Yes, magnificent. Clara's voice was low, almost a whisper. Go on, Victor. Do it. I stiffened. Do what? Victor turned, his smile gone. His eyes burned cold. You know exactly what. You've lived long enough. Dad, you've clung to this business, this house, this legacy. It's time you hand it over. To me, to the one who deserves it. I stare at him, my voice trembling, half from fear, half from fury. Deserves it? You killed your brother. You killed your mother. And now you want me? His face twitched, the mask slipping. He hadn't expected me to say it. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped. But I held my ground. I know enough. I know Margaret caught you that night at the gorge, and she died the next day, poisoned. Beatrice told me everything. For the first time, Victor's confidence faltered. His eyes darted to Clara, whose lips pressed tight. You don't have proof, he hissed. That was when I tapped my jacket. You'd be surprised what I have. Victor lunged. In that instant, Everything blurred, his hands shoving Clara screaming, my feet skidding on gravel. We grappled near the edge, the roar of the river below filling my ears. Let go, old man. Victor snarled. Never. I growled, my strength fueled by decades of rage and loss. Clara grabbed at my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Push him, Victor. Do it now. The three of us teetered dangerously close to the edge. My boots slipped, my heart thundered, but somehow I twisted, pulling Victor forward instead. We both stumbled, hitting the ground hard, inches from the drop. Clara shrieked, losing her balance, tumbling backward into Victor. For a moment, it seemed we'd all go over, but I rolled aside, gasping, as Victor and Clara scrambled, clawing for rocks. They didn't fall, not yet. Sirens wailed in the distance. I smiled grimly. Beatrice had got my letter. She'd gone to the police. Victor froze, hearing the sound. What did you do? He spat. I stood, my chest heaving. I protected myself. And I protected Margaret's memory. You won't hurt anyone else. By the time the officers arrived, Victor and Clara were still at the edge, panting, their plot crumbling around them. The police took my statement. They listened to a recording where Clara had whispered do it, and Victor had confessed through his rage. Beatrice's letter sealed the rest. Margaret's words, Thomas's death, the entire dark web laid bare. As they cuffed Victor, he screamed at me, spit flying from his mouth. You think you've won, old man? You'll die alone. Alone. I stared at him, calm at last. Better alone than damned. Clara tried to plead, her tears a desperate act. It wasn't me, it was him. He made me. But the officers silenced her. As they were led away, I looked out over the gorge, the place that had taken Thomas and Margaret, the place Victor had thought would take me too. Instead, it took him, not his body, but his freedom, his future. I whispered softly into the wind. Rest now, Maggie. Justice has come. Back at the house, I stood in the workshop, running my fingers over the smooth oak of a half-finished chair. The smell of sawdust filled the air, the same smell that had once wrapped around Thomas and me as we worked side by side. The company would never belong to Victor. It would never fall into Clara's hands. It would go to the apprentices, the young ones who had learned the craft with honesty and sweat. For the first time in decades, I felt peace. Margaret's voice echoed in my heart, strong and steady as always. Hold on, Joe. Hold on. And this time, I knew I had.